cops, pigs, 12, 5-0, one time, whatever it is that you call them, in GTA games, we fucking hate them. They always get in our way when we're trying to mess around, they're always corrupt and using endless loopholes, and they always have our protagonists doing their shady business. So now, with all of that said, try to imagine a world in GTA where we are the cops. This is exactly what the GTA 6 community has been theorizing about for over a year now, and the evidence has just gotten a lot stronger. Since trailer 2, there has been an ever-growing theory that Jason Duval is secretly an undercover cop. His military background, being called a Fed, being recognized by other cops, and most importantly a line from the trailer that people can't ignore. So let's take a deep dive into the most controversial theory for GTA 6 right now, and why it may hold more weight than most people might think. Jason being a cop isn't a new theory by any means. Even as back as far as trailer 1, people have theorized that based on his look, he matches the description of someone in the force. He's got buzzed hair, he wears standard issue cargo pants, etc, etc. However, based on a lack of info back then, it wasn't a theory that anyone could take seriously because, well, we didn't know anything about the dude. Come trailer 2, however, and this theory has gone from just a fun discussion to starting a full-blown community debate, and here's why. We will start by listing off everything of relevance towards Jason being a cop, and why this theory now has some credibility. First, we need to look at this interaction with the cop behind the counter, and when he says,
"I think you heard before."
You might have.
Now, assuming the cop isn't mistaking Jason for another person, which I don't think Rockstar would do, this means one of two things. One is that Jason has been to jail before and this cop recognizes him from the prison yard, or two, Jason frequently visits the jail because he either works for the cops or to visit Lucia. But judging from their awkward encounter when he picks her up, it doesn't look like he does this very frequently. Each of those theories can be equally true at this point, but there was one extra detail that people have noticed. If you look closely, the cop behind the counter is wearing a watch that looks almost identical to the one that Jason wears. Now obviously this isn't definitive enough to say that it is the exact same watch, but it resembles it quite clearly. Then a little later in the trailer, we find a situation where Jason is accused of being a Fed. We are obviously missing some very important context for this conversation to use as actual evidence, but it is weird that Jason would be accused of this in the first place, let alone have it mentioned in the trailer. And one aspect of Jason that definitely can't be ignored is his military background. Judging from the tattoo on Jason's shoulder, we know that he was a part of special operations in the military, meaning that Jason not only has worked for the government before, but also has a huge respect for authority and the law. And to add to that, this is definitely speculative, but a good amount of people who return from the military end up working for the police department. In fact, in the States, that number is about 20% of all police officers in the country worked in the military prior to becoming cops. Some people have pointed out that in this screenshot, Jason is wearing a fit that looks eerily similar to one that we saw in trailer 1. The cop in the stash house raid is wearing a backwards cap and a bulletproof vest, and it's almost identical to the one that Jason is wearing while riding with Brian. Again, this isn't definitive enough to say that that cop is actually Jason, but paired with all of the other evidence we've gone over, it's hard to not at least mention it. But by far, the most damning piece of evidence for Jason being involved with the cops is when the police chief says,
"Us cops, we gotta protect each other."
This is a massive piece of evidence, and it is for one main reason. In all other GTA games, and I'll use GTA 5 as an example, every time we heard either Dave or Steve Haynes or even Devin Weston speaking, one of our protagonists was always with them. What I mean by that is, in order for this cutscene to even play, it would only be shown if either Jason or Lucia were in that room. And judging from the fact that Lucia is confirmed to already have a record, it's not hard to see how it could be Jason the chief is talking to. So for him to say "us cops" as if he's speaking to the entire room means that Jason has to be a cop, or is at the very least working with them. When you put all of that evidence together, it's no wonder this theory has had a lot of people talking. However, this wouldn't be much of a deep dive into the theory if I didn't talk about some of the problems that people have about it. And well, there's quite a lot. For one, no matter how undercover or how important your mission may be, you can't go around killing other people. Of course, I'm not talking about in free roam like some people have brought up for this theory, as I think we can all agree that free roam isn't considered canon to the story. But even with that said, if you think we're about to get a GTA game where we aren't going around killing some cops on a mission, then you obviously haven't played GTA. But even beyond that, we have another major issue, and that is the familiar plot. Tell me if this sounds familiar. A white dude from Miami who's secretly an undercover cop, who then falls in love with a Latina girl who's known for being involved in crime as they're trying to find a better life for their family. That is genuinely just the plot to the first Fast and Furious. I mean, we know that Rockstar likes to take a lot of inspiration from Hollywood movies, and as far as we can see, there have already been a good amount of stuff that looks inspired by Fast and Furious, but Rockstar are not the type to cut their story that close to an already existing plot. However, there is one thing that I think gives this theory a little more credibility, and that's the fact that in every GTA game, there's only one thing that Rockstar has never attempted before, and that's making a protagonist a cop. Now, I will submit to the idea that the reason we may have never seen this before is because it just wouldn't work. I've also seen some additional theories going around about Jason not necessarily being a cop, but rather working for them instead, but GTA has seen this dynamic too many times already. In GTA San Andreas, we had dealings with some corrupt cops, and most recently in GTA 5, it was the exact same thing with us doing the Fed's bidding. The only storyline we have yet to see Rockstar attempt is one where our protagonist is the cop, even if it's just for a short while. And to be honest, this could make for a great story going off of the underlying theme that Rockstar has been pushing for, which is trust. In Trailer 1, Rockstar made an effort to show trust as one of the main themes of this game. And to a criminal, there's quite literally no easier way to lose your trust in someone than by finding out that they are a cop, especially if you're in love with them. However, like I mentioned, this is almost identical to the story for Fast and Furious without giving too many spoilers. So far, the only details to the story that we have seen are Rockstar describing it as a criminal conspiracy, which, in terms of GTA games, could quite literally mean anything. So then, where does this leave this in terms of a storyline? We've touched on the fact that he definitely seems to have ties to the police in some way, but on the contrary, we know that him being undercover would cause massive plot holes to the story and gameplay, so something isn't adding up, which means that all we have left is a few different outcomes. The first outcome is Jason is a cop. Based on everything I've seen in the trailers, this is the theory I currently think holds the most weight. However, I don't think it will be a major part of the story like some may think. For example, my theory is that Jason starts off the story as a cop, but after getting caught doing some shady business with Brian, he is later let go from the force and ends up trying to help Lucia find a better life for her family. That's my current theory. I'm not sure how it'll work. I'll need to wait for the game to come out, but there's a lot of evidence supporting a connection between Jason and the cops that I don't think we can ignore. The second outcome is that Jason is working with the feds in some way for his own gain, similar to Michael in GTA 5. But again, this sounds way too similar to stuff that we have already seen in previous games that I don't think it'll make for a new and exciting story. And 3 is that Jason is being forced to do the bidding of the police after being caught for something prior, or potentially after threats against Lucia. Whatever way the story ends up playing out, I put my best bet on the cops being the antagonists of this story in one way or another. But until the game comes out, we will have to wait and see.